Go ahead, do it again.
Good morning, and welcome to the September 20th meeting of the Trustees of Trust Funds. I'm Chris Christensen, and we'll let others introduce themselves. To my right is
Bill Wilkes, trustee.
Liz Petrides, trustee.
Kathy Schur, alternate.
and in the audience we have guests. Would you introduce yourselves, please?
John Hall, Lenny Worcester, and Paul and Kelly representing Last Rest Cemetery.
Thank you all very much. Our first order of business is the minutes of August 23rd. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of August 23rd as written.
I will second that.
Any discussion, corrections, omissions, additions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. 300. Okay, we have representatives from the Last Rest Cemetery here. John Hall is the chairman, so I'm gonna turn the floor
You need to
over
step up to the,
to him. Come up to the table and grab a microphone, make sure it's got a green light.
I'd like to yield my introduction to Len Worcester.
can you make sure the microphones are on?
My name is John Hall. I'd like to yield my portion of the discussion to Len Worcester.
Gentlemen, ladies, we're here to discuss to some extent, the information that we forwarded to you a week or two ago about situation of cost and expenses of maintenance in the cemetery. And the biggest problem is the information will show you that approximately 1/3 of all the graves in the cemetery are in the section A, B, C, and D, the section along Babushek Lake Road. Almost 50% of our total cost of maintenance goes to that 1/3 of the total graves in the cemetery. So one of the issues that could be discussed would be, or needs to be discussed, is a way to adjust the formula instead of being across the board on all 6,000 plus graves, to have two kind of separate formulas where one would apply to this area, one would apply to the other areas that are much easier to maintain. And the other part of it, which the information that provided shows the number of lots that don't have perpetual care funds at all. 43% of the lots in that area don't have any perpetual care funds. In other words, they pay zero.
When you say 43%
Towards
of
the
the
formula.
50%.
No, what Lenny's saying is that for those at home, the cemetery is broken up into two parts. The front part, A, B, C, and D, was town-owned at one point. And in the 70s, the cemetery went to a private cemetery from a town-owned cemetery. And what Lenny's talking about is that of the lots in the front, A, B, C, and D, there is 43% of those lots that were part of the town cemetery that did not have perpetual care. So the back portion, for lack of a better word, for people at home to get a picture of the cemetery itself, A, B, C, and D is if you came in by the First Congregational Church and took that road into the cemetery, from that road into the cemetery, or where the flagpole is, to Babushek Lake, was town-owned at one time. The portion behind there is what the private owned, and there's some private graves in that front section as well, but for the most part, that's town-owned. So what Lenny is saying is that in that section, about 43% of those graves do not have perpetual care. And the other thing Lenny is saying, why the cost is 50% of the cost, is that a lot of those plots in the front part of the cemetery are raised beds. So it's a lot of handwork, whether it's a push mower or whether it's using a weed whacker. So what the board of the Last Rest Cemetery is looking at is that those take a little bit more time than a flat rate. And if, say it's $6.51 a grave for all our maintenance of the cemetery comes out to be, those graves actually take a bigger portion of our time to do it. But in the past, we just used the flat rate. So we're coming here to talk about somehow coming up with a solution to get a different rate for those sections in the cemetery, that the town owns a portion of it, because those are raised, a lot of them are raised beds, and they do take a little bit longer. If you ever drove by and saw our gentleman Austin cutting the grass, you'll see him drive around in on his mower, and then he'll get out of his mower the next day and come in and cut those sections, because you can't get a mower up there.
So you say 43% of them don't have any perpetual funds?
Yes.
I
About
mean-
50% does, and we understand that those 43%, if you don't have money, you can't pay us.
Well,
We
that's
get
what-
that.
That's what I'm asking, I mean.
Right, we understand that,
Yeah.
but the other ones that do have the perpetual care, we're looking at raising that whatever our reimbursement rate is that was agreed upon, I guess, a couple of years ago, to change the formula to allow for a higher reimbursement for those graves that are in the front, because they do use more
So
work.
we don't have an agreed-upon reimbursement rate.
Okay,
You send us a bill, we pay the bill.
all right, that's not what we were told, so,
And it varies. There was 1 year where it was the same 2 years in a row, $6.60 or
whatever. it was.
something like that.
Yeah.
Last year, I think it was $7.40. And it, according to the billing we get, the rate varies depending upon how many cuts there are, which varies depending upon how many times it rains.
Okay.
So we get a bill from you guys per grave, and we pay per grave. So the only difference that I see between what you're talking about in the, shall I call it the back section,
Sure.
is that's easier to maintain. Some years ago, you bought a new tractor for, I think, $10,000. And the depreciation or the amortization of the tractor fell to us on a proportionate basis.
Okay.
So we pay that.
Yeah,
So if you're
we-
not
we don't
using
own
that
any more
if you're
equipment.
not using that tractor in the front, then we shouldn't be paying that portion of the tractor. So you should adjust the rate by whatever it costs.
Okay.
If it costs you $12 on this grave and $6 on that grave, then that's what we have to pay. We don't have any choice about that, because we're supposed to pay for it now. The difference is, at some point in time, presumably you could spend money faster than we can pay it out.
Correct.
I don't foresee that happening, but I do remember in 2007 and 8, we had 3 grave sites, and they were singles, so they had very low funding from the perpetual care funds, and we didn't have enough to pay. So we didn't pay, because we just didn't have the money. And we kept that money, and it accumulated, and by 2009, the growth in our investments and all the rest of the economy brought those back up, and we've been able to pay for those ever since.
Okay.
But it's always been on as long as I've been involved.
Okay.
We pay whatever you bill us,
All right.
and we trust you to be accurate in your calculations.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is that there wasn't a set rate, that we were told there was a set rate, but there wasn't a set rate or agreed upon. That's fine. Probably easier for the person that was doing the billing just to divide everything out and give you a rate that way.
Exactly.
Last
Yeah.
Rest does not own any equipment. We actually contract out all our landscaping and plowing, snow plowing. And I know snow plowing we can't come in for. But we do, all our landscaping is contracted out. So in paraphrasing this, is that if we come up with a fair rate that we think is a fair rate for those graves by whatever hours or whatever it is, that we use, and then we just come in and reimburse you as long as it's fair and equitable for everybody. And as long as there's money in those perpetual cares, sorry, as long as there's money in those perpetual care accounts for those graves, it's okay. We just wanted to get ahead of it because we didn't want to send you a bill and then everybody, you're questioning why did we only pay $15,000 last year and now they're asking for, I'm just saying, throwing a number out there, $22,000. You know, so we didn't want to say.
I just want to be clear on this. So we have 43% that don't have any funds. So 57% of them do have funds. And you're looking for us to parse that group out and have that group pay more than the graves in the back.
Per grave,
So on a
yes.
per grave basis.
Yes. Because they actually have
Versus
more
what
work.
we've been doing is just paying the bill.
Correct. Per grave. Because those graves actually are more labor intensive.
Hypothetically, when grave number 6 of the 57% run out of money, do we let weeds grow up, or?
Nope, we'll cut it. We're still gonna we maintain the cemetery. We're gonna maintain it, just like we maintain those 43% that don't have it, we still maintain it. If they run out of money, we'll still maintain the cemetery. It's not like we're gonna walk away and have
We
6
in
foot.
this case means Last Rest Cemetery, not
Yes.
the town.
You're correct, right. I'm here representing, all honesty, I'm here representing Last Rest Cemetery. I'm a board member on Last Rest Cemetery. For transparency's sake, yes, I am the town manager as well, but I'm here as capacity for Last Rest Cemetery. Because these two gentlemen, they sometimes cannot hear everything, so that's why I'm here. Full disclosure. So, yeah, no, we'll maintain it. Last Rest Cemetery will maintain the cemetery whether we're receiving money for perpetual care or not, and that's what we've been doing.
I'm just trying to understand from an accounting standpoint what difference it makes if we pay the bill, like Chris has alluded to, or told you we do, versus having this, seems like there's a lot of accounting to parse it out by grave. And you're saying, well, we want to do that, but if a grave runs out of money, we'll still do it. So what's the difference?
The difference is that if we had 1,000 graves, and I'm just throwing numbers out there, don't quote me on these numbers, but if we had 1,000 graves and 500 were for the town of Merrimack, we'd take the $6 a grave, say, or with $6,000, we'll take $6 a grave, and we'll say, okay, out of those 500 graves that are the town of Merrimack, 57 are, or say 50, so we'd only ask for $3,000 of the total cost. But that is not what the total cost actually is to take care of those graves. The total cost of actually taking care of those graves might be $4,500. So that's what we're here to talk or ask about. And it seems like we thought there was a agreed upon formula and everything, but it doesn't seem that way. So sorry about that. Shouldn't assume. But that's why we're here, because we thought there was an agreed upon formula. So if we know there's not an agreed upon formula, we'll have to come back to the finance committee and Last Rest and sit with our bookkeeper and figure out a easy, quick way for her to be able to calculate how much it costs per
Who's your
grave.
bookkeeper now? It's not Nancy anymore, right?
No, Nancy resigned. It's Pat.
Okay. So I haven't seen a bill yet in this calendar year.
Correct.
Uh,
Because we wanted to come talk to you first.
Well, we don't normally get it until October anyway.
Right.
I don't know why, but it's always been in October. In any event, Nancy sent us a breakdown of total cost and a depreciation or amortization figure
Mhm.
for the tractor.
Okay.
If you don't own a tractor, I don't know anything about it, but
Yeah.
you've been
I don't
billing
know.
us
Yeah.
for the tractor. And maybe when they bought the tractor, it was some sort of a agreement with the
I don't know. We'll have to look at that too.
landscaper at the time to support that operation.
Mm-hmm.
In any event, that tractor is figured in there, and we get whatever the number happens to be for that. Then there's a total figure expended,
Mm-hmm.
number of times rained and blah, blah, blah. Comes out to
Whatever.
$15,000.
Yep.
Divided by 350 graves, and we pay $6.60 per grave, or $7.10, or whatever it happens to be that year for that year's actual expenses. It's not a calculated number, it's an actual number.
No, that works. I understand it, and I'll explain it here, to everybody on the finance committee and everything else over at the Last Rest Cemetery and the board. And, we'll come up with what we feel is fair and equitable. And,
Well, I don't want what you feel is equitable, we want to know an actual number.
Your
Your
feeling
feeling shouldn't be involved.
Exactly. You're gonna get an actual number, but we gotta come up and figure out how much time it takes to mow these extra hand lots.
Yep,
And that's fair and equitable.
yep, no question.
And that's how maybe I shouldn't use the word feel, but we're gonna give you an actual number. But it's equitable for everybody.
Okay,
Not to make a big deal about it, but the tractor, I mean, what was the amortization schedule, and if it's not being used, and it's never gonna be used, then shouldn't we divest of the tractor and?
Lenny, do you
either-
know anything about the tractor?
The what?
The tractor?
Tractor?
Yeah, we don't own a tractor.
We don't own any equipment.
So yes, it should be divested. I don't understand.
Well, can you find out?
I
why
will find out.
We're getting an amortization schedule, or?
100%. We gotta find out why we're amortizing a tractor, because we don't own any equipment over there. The only thing we owned was a grave warmer, and we don't own that anymore either.
I mean, if we're trying to clean up the books or make them more precise, we oughta
100%.
figure out where this tractor is or where it isn't and get it off the books.
100%. Agreed. Agree 100%. You learn something new every day.
so the bill for this year, will we get it before the end of the calendar year?
For sure.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
The reason why we do it in October is because that's when our landscaping contract ends. So that's why we do it in October. Because snow plowing starts in November. So it runs from April to October. That's why you always got the bill in October.
Bill has always, I shouldn't say this, always appeared to me to be a calendar year bill, just delayed. But if that's the landscaper schedule, then that's fine. We don't have any reason to get involved in that
Nope.
portion of it.
Nope.
Like I say, we get the bill and we pay it.
Correct. We also have a couple other questions. What about like if we have to do tree removal in sections A, B, C, and D? Is that on this Last Rest Cemetery, or is that part of perpetual care?
If it's not a grave site, we're controlled in part by RSAs and bequests of the perpetual care rules and so forth. The grave site itself, 4 by 10 or whatever it happens to be, is covered under perpetual care. But other items on the entirety of the site are the responsibility of Last Rest.
All right?
Now, I recall, this goes back a ways, around 1980, John O'Leary and the Rotary Club at the time had an idea of enhancing the town center by fixing the fence at Last Rest Cemetery and putting up some similar post and rail fence corner sections by the church on Church Street and in that general area of Babusick Lake Road, just to kind of tie that area together. And at the time, I was involved in it because the JCs joined in with the Rotary Club, and I was a JC. At the time, the granite posts that held up the fence along Babusick Lake Road, some had, from ice and freezing and thawing and so forth, had risen up and sunk down, and it was a mishmash of elevations. And Last Rest paid to reset all of those granite posts. And the word was, Last Rest had money for that in their accounting. And my impression was, might not be accurate, my impression was that the money accumulated from new sales was set aside for those general maintenance things, the tree that you mentioned, and paving and whatever else that is not allocated directly to a specific gravesite.
Okay.
But I don't know who pays for the town tomb.
Yeah. That was one of John's questions. He's writing it down there, saying that. No, that's was something we gotta look into too, because that needs some work as well. So, and it's gonna be an expensive job to fix that town tomb, but, we'll look into that as well. Do you guys have any other questions?
Yeah, there are a couple of accounts that jump out at us when we were looking at the things. One was the Everett Parker Fund, where his half of a house was sold, and the funds were to go to the cemetery. And we don't have anything that tells us what was going on, other than in the minutes of the meeting, which you have copies of, which talks about the trustees of the trust fund requesting that money be turned over to them. One of the questions is that money earmarked for a specific grave, or was it to the cemetery in general? And if it was to the cemetery in general, more of the income could be utilized in general use. The same thing with the June Abbott account. Our records showed that when she bought her lot in 1946, I believe it was,
47.
her perpetual
looked it
care
up.
money was $200. And yet that account shows a lot more money than that in two different areas. And we don't have anything that tells us where that money, how that money got there and what its specific use is. Which you may have stuff on it, and we don't.
What was the last name?
June Abbott.
Abbott.
So, June Abbott has two funds. One that we account for as 10 graves, and one that is the Flower Fund. And the Flower Fund, to my knowledge, doesn't have anything to do with Last Rest Cemetery. We have 3 flower funds. June Abbott, Harry Richardson, and Isaac Coombs Shed. And so we put flowers out on those 3 graves every year.
Yeah, that account talks about flag and flower.
Well, it says
I don't know.
flag and flower because the state, when they went to a new accounting system, gave us a list of titles that we're allowed to use. And flag and flower is one of them. Parks and Recreation is another one. Library is one. And we can't say library books. We just have to say the word library because that's programmed into their system. In any event,
So that
we have those 3 flower funds. We
Yeah.
pay for the flowers each year, and they don't have a huge amount of money in them. The others are, if you look at our spreadsheets or the ones that Nancy has been sending out to us, they're based on, as far as I can tell, the numbers that you, meaning Last Rest Cemetery, have given us. And there's a majority of them are 10 graves each. There's some 5s, there's a 3, there's a couple of 1s, and they all have varying amounts of money. However, I think when the money was turned over to the trustees of trust funds around 1955, 54, there was a lump sum of money given, and it was just divided up equally. Because if you look at those numbers on the audited spreadsheets, there's the same amount of money there for something from 1926 and 1946. How did that happen? Only concept I have is there was a lump sum distributed in 1954 when the money was given to us, and it was just distributed equally because it had been previously kept as a lump sum. Assumption. I don't have any paperwork to tell me that. But the town and the state have audited all of these things every year since everything started, and that seems to be acceptable to them. Now, if there are some grave sites that have 12 sites instead of 10, then you should bill us for 12. It's still gonna be the same amount of money. You're gonna get a little bit more this year because now you're billing for 12, and you'll spend the money faster.
Because of the way they did it, they just arbitrarily picked a date, and when they voted to take all 12 grave lots and just convert them into tents, because it wasn't gonna work anymore with vaults and boxes, and
Yeah.
as opposed to a little wooden crate that they used to use in the old days. To try to differentiate today between which ones actually are 12s and which ones are actually 10s, I think it's easier to just, leave them at 10s. I know what you're saying, and, it would make an adjustment, yeah, but
Okay, well,
I'm not 100% sure we could honestly look you straight in the eye and say, these are absolutely the ones. I don't know. It would be wishy-washy.
Well, and based on that, you could say, well, some of them are 10s and some are 12s, but the 12s are smaller each because they didn't have concrete boxes at the time. So I go back to you do your best job and we do our best job, and when we get the bill, it's billed on a per grave by name, and that's what we have to pay.
Correct.
So,
So we're back to
We're back to
changing the formula.
looking at it and tracking our costs.
if you need, well, I guess Nancy or Pat would have the numbers for the last many years. If you need those numbers, we can get them to you.
No, we have them in the records. Like I said, we thought there was a formula agreed upon, so that's why we're here for that and to ask those other questions.
Well,
We
I think it was
appreciate your time.
formulaic up to the point where we said, whatever the amortization was for the tractor and so much per grave because we had this total and divided by and so forth. I think
Right.
that's the formula, if you will.
Yep, no, we're okay. We're okay. We'll regroup on our own and send you a bill in October. And if you have questions,
Well, at some
We'll be
point,
here to
come
answer.
back and tell us what you decided.
we will. When we come back and give you the bill, they'll come back and talk.
Would it possibly make any sense to have one or two of your board members and a couple of our board members have a little workshop and discuss some of this a little more and come up with the formula and whatnot together?
Sure.
Well,
Something to
we
think
we
about.
can
You
do
don't have
that.
to answer it today.
It's a matter of, I think, first things, for you to go back to your finance committee that you mentioned and have them determine what the expenses were for this year, because I don't think there's gonna be much change.
No. Landscaping went up $2,000.
I'm sorry, how much?
Landscape went up $2,000, I think. I think that's what the contract was. When he
Okay.
re-signed, it was at $2,000.
Divided by 300 graves, it's not an astronomical figure.
No, but we're always expanding too. So
Yeah,
that
but
number keeps on
doesn't-
shrinking.
When you expand, don't you get, I mean,
We
those are new
got, we
fees
keep
and
our own
everything.
perpetual care for that section of it,
Yeah,
but it's,
I mean, have
You know,
those
it-
fees been adjusted to adjust for everything else going up?
Yeah, the last rest cemetery portion of it has, but when you expand the cemetery and you add 1,000 or 2,000 graves, it dilutes the overall. You know, your denominator gets bigger, your numerator stays the same, it dilutes that portion of it. Because the expansion
Well,
part that we're doing,
the numerator can get bigger too if you adjust it for the
yeah, for the other portion
inflated
of it,
cost.
right, so. But it's easier to cut some of the expansion costs, zip, 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 instead of going around all the monuments and everything else.
Sure.
in the Front or the section near Buzzardick Road.
So, just for my information, how does that work? Rivet collects the money and then he pays you, or
Nope.
or they come to the town?
Nope.
What's the conduit,
The conduit is that Last Rest Cemetery sells the graves, and when they have a grave opening, they pay perpetual care, and it gets paid directly to Last Rest Cemetery. We have a keeper of the, we have a keeper of the cemetery that does all that on a contract.
So I can buy a gravesite,
Mm-hmm.
and if I don't put anything in that gravesite, I don't pay for perpetual care?
Lenny, he's asking if you buy a gravesite, they don't pay perpetual care until there's a tomb in there, right? When do they pay perpetual care, they're asking?
When they buy it, they pay it right then and
Yeah,
there.
when they buy it,
Okay. That makes more sense.
yeah.
And in older lots that didn't have, and we'll take A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. These are the second set of the old area. Some of those lots still didn't have perpetual care. And in order for those families to use them today, they have to put the perpetual care on them before they can have another burial on that lot.
Okay,
So our system for
that makes sense.
getting everybody on the same sheet of music.
Yeah, so we're really working with two perpetual care accounts. Working with the trustee of trust funds for ABCD, and Last Rest Cemetery has their own perpetual care for the rest of it.
So the monies that you have for perpetual care, how's that managed? Strictly in-house, or you,
Yeah, it's managed in-house. We have it in, whatever we have it in, and then we know what we have, like, with the town, you have your principal, and we have our principal set aside. And then whatever we earn on that is what we can use for perpetual care. And we sell lots still. We've been selling lots. That's why we're expanding. The cemetery's expanding. So, then we've been selling lots and.
how
using
many
some of it.
acres left for development?
What do we got, Lenny? How many more acres?
Probably 3.5, 4.
Yeah, and what are we looking at? About 25-year build-out? Last time we looked? 25 to 30?
We'll be here for a while, but the subject was brought up back in the early 90s that the town should be thinking ahead, that when there's no more land left, the law says you shall provide. So it won't be our responsibility, meaning Last Rest Cemetery. It will be the town's responsibility.
Could be an expensive acquisition.
We have graves. Taking off my Last Rest Cemetery hat. We do have graves. We have Reed Cemetery by the fire station, South Fire Station, that we have land there that we can expand on right now.
Okay, anything else? Ladies,
No, thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you.
coming.
Thank you
It
for
was
hearing
very-
us.
We thank you.
thank you very much.
Yeah. Take care. Yeah.
Okay, next item on the agenda is for the annual reports, which have been submitted to the state. I have to chuckle at this a little bit. They got bounced back and said, we don't have the documentation for the scholarship funds to be expendable. So I sent them the same email that I sent them, I resent the same email that I sent last year with copies of the stuff from the Watson family. And they said, oh, okay, you're good. So that's all taken care of. I don't have any feedback yet from the town audit. And I put down on here about school board presentation. Part of that came to mind when we were talking about the forest last month, because the school is involved in the receiving some of that money. But we have funds for the prize speaking contest that has not been run for some years. We have money for the Lego League that has not been expended for a couple of years. They didn't run Lego League during the COVID pandemic. And I'm wondering if anybody wants to go meet with the school board, or want to send them a letter and say, hey, we got all this money and you guys accepted it and gave it to us, or for whatever reasons, and there's an obligation to run the programs. Anybody want to write a letter or have a joint meeting with them or some other solution? I just feel an obligation. If we have the money for those programs, we should be sure they're run.
I can help write a letter. I don't know if I'll be able to make it in front of the board. Should we have them, invite them to come meet with us?
We can make that part of the letter.
Good.
I think if you send a letter, at least you're apprising them of the situation, and hopefully they would respond to it.
Okay. Liz and I can get together and work on that.
Future meetings.
October 18th, and the plan right now, it looks like, is to recess the meeting and go walk around the woods,
That sounds like fun.
I can't wait.
weather permitting.
Bring your hiking boots.
Yeah.
And November 22nd, we have Cambridge Trust coming to that meeting. So in the October meeting, we should just take a look at any questions we might have, so that if we have anything that requires any research, they can look it up and be prepared without trying to put anybody on the spot at the last minute. And anything else that might properly come before us?
I'm good.
Seeing none, we're at the end of the agenda. We are adjourned at 9:45. And I have